John walked leisurely past the shelf mark and again cursed the whole world softly. Village women gathered at the counter. What else could they do? Nothing else but talk. He did not like these women, whispering to the pain in his teeth. He did not like. Good. At least now he sees them very rarely. When he was offered the post of gamekeeper in a hut on the middle cordon, he agreed without hesitation. He was alone. Why not agree? In fact, it gave the women no peace and a free man, one might say, a groom. So he ran away from the village, but it wasn't always like that. Once long ago, he was not John yet. He was Ivan Vanka, a tractor driver, the first guy in the village, and he had a bride, Anne, a girl he had been looking at since school. After graduation, she reciprocated, promised to wait for him from the army, and kept her promise. John flew to the village on the wings of happiness and immediately applied for marriage with Anne. They played a big wedding and began to live on. But in the 8th month, Anne gave birth to a boy, weak but viable. He drove them away from him, but Anne could not cheat on him because they had such love. Some kind people hurried to open John's eyes, and John believed them. John could not disbelieve them because the secret was revealed to him by his best friend, and he did not lie. She couldn't stand Peter for some reason. Knowing this, John went home and took a bottle of wine and some snacks. The bathhouse was full of snacks, and they settled there. Peter asked in passing, "How do you like being a dad, John?" Even smiled, but did not show that he was so handsome. "Yes, I'm afraid to take him in my arms." Peter did not hide a grin. "But yes, they are all good little ones and all their own strangers." John was wary and poured another shot. "We drank and again put in a good word for you." Peter grinned. John could not stand it and grabbed his friend by the chest. "Not youly, Peter. If you want to say something, say it. Not spreading gossip like a grandmother eavesdropping." Pete, with difficulty, freed himself from behind the sniffing of the offended and began to tell John how Anna left while he was in the service. When John came back in the morning, either drunk or happy, everyone knew about it, Sade pushing closer to the exit. "And you, if you're a fool, pick up someone else's stuff." John even put his fist down on the table and slammed it on the table, and Peter had already left, disappearing into the twilight. John angrily poured a glass of Belenka and couldn't stand it. He went home to this house, and they moved in right after the wedding. They did not live to see the birth of their grandson until the son's army died in a forest fire. Anne was left an orphan in the family of her aunt in a neighboring village. She was so happy that now they had a family of their own, and the house itself was broken. John drank till morning, and when Zorka was busy and the villagers drove the cows into the herd, the man faltered and rushed into the barn where he kept his gun in a chest, and Baba Nura, the first gossip in the village, saw him returning to the hut. After a while, the gawkers began to come out into the street, and John fell into the house and poked his sleeping wife with the barrel. "Get up, I tell you." Anne opened her eyes, but she was not frightened at all, blocking from the drunken man the cot with her sleeping son Johnny. Smirked. "Evil, come on. Yes, take your ugly son." "Take away." The woman's eyebrows rose in indignation. "Ugly son? It's you about your son," John blossomed. Sang, not son. "He thanked me, and people opened their eyes." The woman long looked into the eyes of her husband, and then began to hurriedly dress. "This Pete, what? Well, then everything is clear." She frantically threw in a bag of diapers and dummies of the son and picked up the child in her arms. And John led barefoot Anne with a child in his arms through the village and led her under the gun like a criminal. She walked with her head proudly raised, although the barrel rested against her back. And behind them flowed a crowd of spectators. People tried to reason with the drunken man. But it was not to be. At the very edge of the village, the man looked back with a twisted face and shot the spectators at their feet and pushed his wife with the butt of his rifle. John began to regain consciousness only towards lunchtime, so he could not get up on his own. "But there is no water. Give me water," he asked pathetically, opening his eyes. Then his eyes stumbled on the rifle lying nearby, and his memory favorably reconstructed the events of that night. John spent a week as if in a delirium. He brushed away all sorts of trinkets with the palm of his hand. At the bottom lay the medical card of Anne's son. He wanted to throw his son away without looking, but a strange inscription, "Premature baby born at 31 weeks, caught his eye. At 31 weeks, John's jaw even dropped, as if the child was born prematurely, but he was born at term like crazy. He rushed to his friend Pete, but he did not dry up for the second week. John clenched his fists and grinned crookedly at Peter, not taking his heavy gaze off the bottle. But then Pete's mother rushed into John's arms and hung on his palms. "Your wife didn't go out with anyone, but don't beat your son. He said that he decided to hit on a girl while you were in the army. She hit him with a poker." And Pete laughed. "It's not funny. My Anne should have been near me. I love her more than life. I would have made her happy. She didn't see anyone around. She was waiting for you, you fool." But John didn't hear the last words. He was flying. He had nothing under his feet. He should have gone to the village where Anne's aunt lived and thrown himself at the feet of his beloved to beg forgiveness. But John was too late. John searched for his wife for a long time, looking for her through all his acquaintances in the city, traveled there himself many times, searched the whole district, the whole region, and nothing. Almost 20 years have passed, and people greet each other only in turn. People's memories are long, and the gossip behind their backs is evil. But today I have to go to the shop. Tomorrow the chairman of the region will bring a long-awaited assistant from the region for a summer internship. So what if the assistant, if he himself walks quickly and without fatigue? John has no time for poachers are rampaging for the second year. Oh, how necessary a partner is. By the time he got to the camp, a green UAZIC drove up, and the panting chairman got out of the car and stretched crisply. "It's good here, Makarik. You can eat air with a spoon." John even frowned angrily. "Where is the promised help, Greg Kuzmich?" Why did one chairman grin in his mustache as at the fork a guy got off and said he wanted to walk? John Makarich fussed so as not to get lost only. The chairman waved his hand. This one would not get lost. He was persistent and asked questions all the way. "Yes, here he is. Feed us." John liked him at once. Tall, shouldered, open, businesslike, cautious. Cyril introduced himself, washed his hands in the hand basin, and sat down at the table without fuss, ate with appetiti, and told what he had learned on the way. John Evan grinned at such a conversation. They talked a little, mostly about business. The boy managed to tell that he lives with his mother in the regional center, and he has a fiancée and a cherished dream, but Makarik, even here, did not reveal the truth. And then during their rounds, the worst happened when they came across a poacher's camp. Drunken men came out of their tents and grabbed their rifles. A verbal altercation ensued, and then a shot rang out. In time to notice where the hunter was aiming, Cyril covered Cyril with his hand, and realizing what had happened, the criminals in a panic hurriedly loaded the car and left. John was in the forest. Bleeding, Cyril bandaged Makarik and called an ambulance, and then all the way held his hand so that not. So on the way, John asked his wife to find forgiveness, to ask for forgiveness, because he always loved Anne and his son. Such is the fate of the young and all sorts of opportunities. If he is conscious, he will drive him. There is hope. When John opened his eyes again, the room was in semi-darkness. Only the diffused light of the night light cast a vague shadow. Yes, in the headboard of the bed lurked a female silhouette. The gamekeeper strained his eyes. "Anne, but it simply cannot be. So he is dead. And Anne too. Too bad. It was all his fault." And then the devices connected to him roared, and the tall doctor burst into the room. Great. He stopped John's attempt to rise, and the cold steel of the needle entered his vein. "Now rest." The man twisted his head restlessly. Anne's ghost was gone. It was a pity that he was already falling asleep when a woman's face leaned over him. Anne, a little different from what he remembered, but recognizable and very... With a last effort of will, John grasped her palm and happily passed out with the first rays of the sun. John snapped out of his languid slumber as the beautiful woman held his hand, but he kept whispering, "Just don't go away. I have so much to tell you. I'm sorry." Anne opened her eyes and smiled. "Don't waste your strength. I know everything." He shook his head. "You know, but where?" The woman was looking somewhere in the direction of his son. He told everything somehow, and John wanted. John looked perplexedly at Anne, and into the room entered Cyril. "Hello, Makarik." "Oh, sorry, father." The boy smiled happily, and unsolicited tears flowed down John's cheeks. "God, how can I realize everything that happened and not go crazy? Is it possible?" And a month later, John proudly walked through the village with Anne in his arms. A month later, John proudly walked through the village with Anne in his arms. Rumors became less, but now they did not denigrate his favorite woman and not less favorite son. And he didn't care about the rest from a high bell tower. He had his life back, and he didn't care about other people's rumors. Yes, and they didn't start a new wedding.